Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Sherrone Moore, Bryce Underwood, this Michigan football program, continuing to work through spring practice. And, as you continue to work through spring practice, I think your evaluations of players like Bryce Underwood, it gets a little bit more real. In the beginning of spring, it was very evident that Bryce Underwood was bringing a different kind of talent level to this quarterback room, right? It's one thing to stand out early, shoulder pads and helmets, throwing on air. It's very evident that Bryce Underwood is the most talented quarterback in this room. It's a whole nother thing when you get into week 3, week 4 of spring practice, when you start getting into some more live scrimmage situations and you got a year 2 Wink Martindale defense that's throwing the kitchen sink at you. If you're a Michigan fan, you still love what you're hearing. Now, you're hearing some things about Bryce where he's an early enrollee true freshman that should be a senior in high school and is putting the ball in harm's way at points, but you're also hearing about the playmaking ability, the tight window throws, the athleticism getting outside the pocket. To me, that's what excites me the most for really a couple of different reasons. Look, I want Bryce Underwood to really be aggressive down the field. It's very similar to what we talked about with JJ, where look, JJ put the ball in harm's way at times because that's kind of what it takes to win national championships and have an elite caliber offense. You are not bringing Bryce Underwood in to be a Davis Warren, Cade McNamara. You're bringing him in to be a JJ McCarthy caliber quarterback where we are going to put you in situations and we are going to ask you to really elevate this offense. And so to hear that, yeah, Bryce Underwood's making some freshman mistakes while he's trying to figure out what he can and can't get away with at the college football level, you still love to hear that he's being a difference maker among this Michigan offense. Now, I think the second thing that really excites me is the playmaking ability outside the pocket, especially when, and we'll get into this a little bit down the road here, we still have question marks about the Michigan offensive line. Well, guess what? When you have a quarterback like Bryce Underwood, you can do things to take some pressure off the Michigan offensive line. I mean, you go back to 2024 with a guy like Davis Warren, teams did not have to account for Davis Warren's ability to get outside the pocket, to hurt a defense with his legs. If you're a defense going into 2025, you have to account for that. You can't just blindly pin your ears back and try to get after the quarterback, because if you do and you're not disciplined with your pass rush lanes, Bryce Underwood's going to hurt you. But you also can, do things like move in the pocket. Last year with Davis Warren, you really couldn't ask him to throw off platform. You really couldn't get him on the run and move the pocket because he just, one, didn't really have the athleticism to do it. But I think secondly, didn't really have the ability to throw off platform like a guy like Bryce. With the addition of Bryce, even though we still have some question marks about figuring out this offensive line, there are things you can do to really take some pressure off the offensive line, specifically in pass protection, that, quite frankly, you just couldn't do with a guy like Davis Warren in the 2024 year. Now, I want to get into a couple of different storylines, including what the quarterback room looks like currently with Mikey Keene out with an injury that sounds to be somewhat significant. Want to do a little check-in on some of the pass catchers that are starting to stand out a little bit. Want to talk about the offensive line and how that's, kind of shaping up, where you're hearing some things that, maybe are a little bit concerning, but you're also hearing some things that, you should be excited about as well. Before we get into it, as always, the Michigan fans, let it fly in the comment section. There are a lot of different ways you can kind of interpret how spring practice is going for Michigan. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas as we've broken down all these different storylines has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. And let's start with, the Mikey Keene news, where you bring Mikey Keene in to kind of be the veteran presence in the room, but he's not practicing yet. And it sounds like the injury that Mikey Keene is working through, and I'll raise my hand, I don't know what the injury is, but it sounds like it's a little bit more serious than we thought to start spring. Now, you obviously want Mikey Keene back, ready to go going into 2025, because he is that veteran presence. I mean, if you don't have Mikey Keene and we're just rocking with Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis, as talented as both of those quarterbacks are, that's a really young quarterback room that has almost zero playing experience at the college football landscape. You want Mikey Keene back going into 2025, but the fact that he's not ready to go in the spring, I don't know if I go as far to say it's a blessing in disguise, because I don't want to say that about Mikey Keene. I'm really excited about what he brings to the quarterback room, but it's going to allow Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis, but I think more importantly, Bryce Underwood, to get a lot of reps. I mean, in this era of college football, with the ability to bring in transfer portal additions, you see a lot of teams really shy away from leaning into their young talent. And they say, hey, I'm going to bring in maybe one or two veteran quarterbacks to kind of come in and compete and provide that veteran presence in the room, which, again, I don't blame Sherrone Moore for doing that. I think you had to do something like that. But at the same time, when you do that, guess what? Now you got 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the room, and you only have a certain amount of reps in a singular practice and 15 practices in the spring. Now it's hard to get your freshman quarterback that you want to get ready enough reps to kind of get him prepared to play in 2025. With Mikey Keene not being present in practice, Bryce Underwood's getting more reps as a freshman quarterback than any other quarterback across the country, because there's only 2 healthy quarterbacks in this room, with Davis Warren still working back from that ACL. You want Mikey Keene back to start 2025 because you want a quarterback that's played some college football in your room. But the fact that it's just Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis means there's a lot of development that's taken place, and these coaches are solely focused on developing these young quarterbacks. I think far too many times you see coaches, I should say, kind of get scared of youth and bringing guys to kind of drown out the youth on your roster. It sounds like Michigan's leaning in to the young quarterbacks, especially when the expectation is that Bryce Underwood's going to be the guy. You want him getting as many reps as possible. You go back to the 2024 season and what we heard in spring practice and fall camp, it was a 5-way position battle to start at quarterback for Michigan. And so you had so many reps going to so many different players, didn't really give the opportunity for a single quarterback to really grab control of the offense. Bryce Underwood's, he's been given that shot, and from everything we are hearing, he is taking it and running with it. And I think that should excite a lot of Michigan fans. The other storyline that I think is starting to intrigue me is the specifically the big bodies that are emerging in this wide receiver room. You go back to Michigan's offense in 2024, we all know that there were plenty of problems to go around. You know, it started at the quarterback spot, went to the pass catcher spot, it went to the offensive coordinator spot, it was on the offensive line as well. One of the things that I think really hurt this Michigan offense in 2024 is just not having big body vertical wide receivers. I mean, every single wide receiver last year, outside of Colson Lovell playing tight end, was kind of similar skill sets. Tyler Morris, Freddie Moore, Samaj Morgan, those aren't big bodies that can work vertically down the field. I think the biggest body in that room last year was Kenny Bell, who's 6'2", and he's long, he's 6'2", but he only had 15 targets on the year. You're hearing that both Donovan McCulley, coming from Indiana in the transfer portal, and true freshman Jamar Broder, who both go 6'5", 200 plus, are starting to really show out and make plays down the field. We know in the Chip Lindsey offense that we're going to push the ball down the field a little bit more, especially with a quarterback like Bryce. But we need some big body pass catchers to give us those kind of playmakers vertically down the field for Bryce. And it sounds like Donovan McCulley and Jamar Broder have both risen to the occasion. And you're kind of getting a diverse skill set that is starting to emerge. Where, Donovan McCulley, Jamar Broder are your 2 big-bodied X-wide receivers that can work vertically down the field and go make contested plays. You have a guy like Freddie Moore, who I think is kind of a do-it-all kind of guy, really diverse route tree, can work vertically down the field, but also really good with the football in his hands. Then you have guys like Samaj Morgan, transfer Anthony Simpson, that are yards after the catch guys. Go back to 2024. It seems like every single wide receiver last year had the same skill set. And now you fast forward to where we are in 2025. It's still a room that I think has to prove itself in the 2025 year, but at least you have different kind of skill sets in the room, which is going to allow Chip Lindsey to ask and do a lot of different things on the offensive side of the football. Offensive line, still a work in progress. Now, we talked about it. I think Bryce Underwood brings an ability for Chip Lindsey to take some pressure off the offensive line, specifically in pass protection, which I think's big. I think the mere presence of Bryce Underwood, not only as an athlete, but a quarterback that can push the ball down the field, will prevent Michigan from seeing as many, 7, 8, 9-man boxes, because that was essentially all Michigan saw last year. Teams knew we couldn't throw the football down the field, so we're going to roll in our safeties every single time and just kind of load the box and bring some pressure. because we know you ain't going to beat us over the top. I think the presence of Bryce Underwood's athleticism, I think the presence of Bryce Underwood being able to push the ball down the field a little bit more, that should take some pressure off the offensive line. It probably should allow this offensive line to run the football a little bit better, so we're not sitting in so many third and longs like we were last year. Now, from a personnel standpoint, I personally am probably more optimistic about this unit than most. And look, to the Michigan fans who disagree with that, I see where you're coming from. It was not perfect for Evan Link. There were a lot of growing pains for the redshirt freshman in 2024. I just think that Evan Link played his best football down the stretch. Thought Andrew Sprague played really, really good football against Alabama as a true freshman. The interior of the offensive line I feel good about. Giovanni Ilhadi, Greg Crippen, Nathan Afobe, Jake Winera, Luke Hamilton. I feel like the interior offensive line is going to be a solid unit. I think the biggest concern is tackle, probably specifically left tackle, with Evan Link making that transition from right to left. We'll see. I think you'll get a sense of what Michigan thinks of their offensive line based on what they do in the transfer portal. If you see Michigan get aggressive, there's going to be one or two. They ain't going to be many tackles that hit the portal that are great, that are starting caliber. There will be a few. If Michigan gets aggressive for one or two of them, that probably tells us they want to make an addition. But if they don't, I wouldn't really be surprised if Michigan says, hey, Evan Link's going into year 3. Normally year 1 starting to year 2 starting, it's when you see the jumps. I wouldn't be surprised if you maybe get some progression from some of these young offensive linemen who were thrown into the fire in 2024. I think the other storyline is Brady Norton, who I think we all had some question marks about, hey, is this kid going to jump up from the FCS ranks to the Big Ten ranks and be trustworthy, especially at tackle? He's getting looks at tackle, and it sounds like he's a really good athlete. Now, does Brady Norton provide that big body road grading tackle that Michigan might be looking for? No. But it does sound like he is pleasantly surprising people within the program in terms of his ability to play at the Big Ten level immediately in 2025. It probably remains to be the biggest question we have on this football team. And I think it's worth noting that, look, this Michigan offensive line, who are they going up against in practice? I mean, you scroll this defensive line, it ain't easy, right? Especially at the edge, especially for these tackles. I mean, working against TJ Guy, who as a pure pass rusher was awesome for Michigan in 2024. Derek Moore might be the most underrated player in all the country. You're probably seeing a decent amount of Jayshawn Barham coming off the edge as well. They're getting battle tested in spring. And so just because they're not necessarily winning their reps against guys like Derek Moore does not necessarily mean they can't play for Michigan in 2025 as well. I think the last storyline that I want to touch on the offense, and you guys know the defensive side of the football, I am a believer in what this defense can be, especially year 2 under Wink Martindale. The last storyline, you guys probably noticed, I made a change to the depth chart here. Jordan Marshall is competing. Now, I think we know that this running back room is probably going to be close to a 50-50 split between Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes. It sounds like there's not much of a difference, and y'all know how I feel about Justice Haynes. I think he was the best running back available in the transfer portal, rightfully so. I think the kid's a stud. And you're having Jordan Marshall going into year 2, not really backing down from the competition and sounding like he might be the better running back in the room. I think that's huge for Michigan. And you go back to Jordan Marshall as a true freshman, especially in that Alabama game. Here's a crazy stat that I think some Michigan fans have heard me say. Jordan Marshall forced 12 missed tackles. One game against Alabama, he forced 12 of them. Donovan Edwards last year forced only 17 the whole entire season. So that one game from Jordan Marshall, he almost got to the amount of missed tackles Donovan Edwards forced. I don't think it's crazy to say this running back room, even though you lose 2 really good running backs. This is not a shot at Donovan Edwards or Kalel Mullings. Kalel Mullings being one of my favorite Michigan football players ever. Not a shot at those two. It's more just highlighting it. This running back room can be really good. And if this offensive line comes together, you're looking at a rushing attack that has the bones to be very dangerous for Michigan, especially as you have a passing attack that doesn't make this Michigan offense one-dimensional. It's so hard to run the football consistently and well when you don't have a passing attack. And we saw that last year. If you can develop a downfield passing attack that we expect from Bryce Underwood and Chip Lindsey, this rushing attack should take a big step in the right direction. A lot of spring to go. Not a ton of spring to go. We have the spring game coming up in about 2 weeks. We're going to watch that. We're going to talk about that. It'll be an opportunity to really gauge where this team at is. And I think the most exciting thing for us Michigan fans is this team ain't afraid to go to the transfer portal and make some things happen. So if we come out of spring saying, hey, we might need one more starting caliber tackler, we might need one more difference maker in the wide receiver, and we're going to know, and we'll probably see Michigan pursue that. We'll sign out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.